So this video is going to show the setup of a iRvision error proofing example for a R-30iA controller. So I got a 200 IC LR-mate robot and using the R-30iA controller. So the first thing that we want to do here is find out the IP address. So going to the Teach pendant, we can go to Menu, and we want to go to Setup. So I'll select 6 for Setup, and then we go to F1 for Type, and you look at the options there. We want to actually go to the second screen of options, and we want to choose 5 host communication. So this gives us the setup protocols, and the first protocol is the TCP/IP protocol. So we want to go in there, and we can see now the IP address of the robot. If you want to, you can hit enter and you can change this IP address and punch in some new IP address. And you can set the subnet mask, and you can set the router IP address. And now if you make changes here, what you need to do is click on the next button and select init. Okay, so if you select init, it will basically apply those changes. So you need to make sure if you do make changes to it that you select init and then come over here, say yes, and hit enter and apply any changes if you need to change the IP address of the robot. All right, so in this case, I'm actually using the Roboguide software. And so we have the, we can see that the IP address I'm using is actually just one of the internal local loopback IP addresses, which is the one I actually set it to is 127.0.0.2. All right, and of course the router IP doesn't matter, but it's just all on the local computer because it's using the Roboguide software, so that's not really important here. But next then, what we want to do is go to the Internet Explorer. So I'm going to pull up my Internet Explorer, and I'm going to go to the IP address. So up here in the address bar, I'm going to go to 127.0.0.2. Now, if it gives you any trouble, it shouldn't with a 127 IP, but if you run into issues, you need to go to Tools, Internet Options, Security, Trusted Sites, and add this. So you want to come in here, you need to make sure that this require encrypted services, which is HTTPS. The S stands for secure, which basically means encryption. You need to make sure that that is unchecked, and then you can actually add this IP to a trusted website and close that. All right, and so you'll have to do that before you actually try to run the software. So you can see here under iRvision, we have Vision Setup, Vision Log, and Vision Runtime. So if I click on Vision Setup, okay, and it goes through, and it should be trying to install the software right now, and it is not doing that. I'm going to hit refresh on my screen here. And try it again. So it may not like my IP address. All right, so one other thing I might want to set here. Now, I did change my IP address to the 127.0.0.1 loopback. And the other thing is I'm going to go to Compatibility View Settings, and I'm going to add this to my compatibility. So that may have been, I see that wasn't added before. So you need to make sure that you add compatibility view to your setup there. Okay, so again, we're going to go to Alt, Tools, and select compatibility view, and the IP that you're currently trying to access probably should already be listed there, and you can just add that. So you need to make sure you add the compatibility view and the security. So again, go to Internet, hit the Alt button to get the menu, Internet options, and then security, trusted sites, okay, and add this site. So again, make sure that this is unchecked and add your site. Okay, and so now if I come in here, I'm going to click on Vision Setup, and there we go. Now it's actually copying the setup files that are going to be needed to run the interface. So here you can see it pops up. Now again, this is the setting for the R-30iA 2D iRvision software. So it'll look a little bit different depending on the version of the robot that you have. When you look over here, you see there is a camera setup, there are camera calibration tools, and then there's vision process tools and some other settings there. So what we want to do is we're going to go to camera setup, which is actually the screen we're looking at. And when you look at this, you see that there's actually just all kinds of cameras sitting here. These have just been created, and I can delete them if I don't want them. I can just come in here and delete these, because actually this robot only has one camera. So in this case, we've got multiple cameras set up, but they all are actually really for the exact same camera. So now I'm going to double click on this camera setup. So I'm going to double click on this, and you know, I get this pop-up stuff. We need to make sure that we enable that. All right, so I'm just going to say always allow for this website. And but if I come over here and I double click on this, I will get my settings here. And so what you see over here is you see the camera. You can you have a port number. All right, so by default you'll have, depending on the type of robot, but you should have like 4 ports or maybe only 1 port. But you select the port number and then the type of camera. Now this particular robot just has the Sony Analog XC56 camera. And then you have the default exposure. So you can come over here and you can change the exposure. And then it will change the screen. Now, in this case, I'm running this on Roboguide, so I don't actually have a camera. All right, but if you had a camera physically attached, you could come over here and select Live View, and you could then adjust the focus or the zoom of your camera. And it would continuously update. And then when you're ready, you come and, yeah, it's probably not going to work too well here because I don't actually have a camera. Okay. But then you could come over and do a snap. So if you do the red, that just takes 1 snapshot. All right. And, but again, you could do that and adjust your focus. So the default exposure time here is, depending on your lighting, you normally have to change that number. The smaller the number, the darker the image will be. So if the image is too bright, you want to make the default exposure smaller. If the image is too dark, then you want to make the exposure time longer. And then you also have to select whether you're actually attached to this robot. So if this camera is attached to the faceplate of the robot, the camera is going to move. And that's what this robot-mounted camera checkbox is. So if you mount the camera to the robot, the camera will be moving, and so it needs to know that. And so you would check that. In this case, I've got the camera is fixed, okay? And again, I'm getting lots of error messages here because I'm actually running this in Roboguide, which doesn't actually have a camera. So that's why the port numbers kind of disappeared on me here. Okay, so I'm going to close this without saving, if it'll let me. All right. Now, so once you create your camera, then you could calibrate the camera using a grid. Now, I'm not going to discuss that for this lecture because we're just going to do an error proofing. So I'm going to come to Vision Process Tools, and I want to cancel. I don't want to save any changes right there. All right, but we can do what's called error proofing. Now, I'm just going to load up one from last year. So I'm just going to double click on this and to do error proofing. And so when you see this now, it's not actually showing me an image because, again, I don't actually have a camera attached. But what you would do here is you come in here and you have the error proofing. All right, and so the error proofing, the first thing we would do is select which camera. Okay, so you got to select which camera, and then you specified whether it's fixed or auto exposure mode. So sometimes you can use auto exposure mode, and then you have the exposure time. Okay, so you see this is really dark. I'm not sure if there's an image here or the exposure is just way too small. Yeah, I think there's just, in this case, the exposure. But you can change the exposure. And then you can also have multiple exposures if you're trying to do something and it doesn't work too well. Maybe you need to add a couple of exposures. And then you can log, you can either log every image that you take, failed images, or don't do any logging. All right, so I think a lot of times when you're starting out, you might want to be logging everything so you can compare what's being passed and failed compared to what is there or not there. All right, and then what we're going to do now, we come over to the GPM locator tool. All right, and so on the GPM locator tool, GPM stands for Geometric Pattern Match. So we're looking for a pattern. And so you can see here, I actually have an image. They're showing you like a little small image. Now that should be showing up on the left-hand side too, but because I don't actually have a camera, you know, that's not there. But this is the thing that I taught. So what I do is I type teach, and what it'll do is it'll pop me up a little box over here on the left-hand side so that I can go in and select an area, and then I can go in and teach that area, okay? And then we can edit the mask. So when we come over here, you notice all the gray and the red. So the red is being masked out. So everything that is being masked out, I'm saying ignore that. Or so yeah, everything with this like kind of rosy color over top of it is being masked out or ignored. All right, and so you can change that using, like, they have these rectangular boxes, so you can mask something. Or if you right click, you can unmask it. All right. But what I find a lot of times, what I prefer is the freehand option. So you can choose the freehand option, and you can choose either thick, very thick, okay, and you can mask it, or you can unmask it with the right mouse click. All right. But what you want to do is start by masking everything. So just mask it all. All right, and say ignore everything. So the best way to really do vision is to start by ignoring everything, and then to say, okay, what do I care about? So then we come in and we, using the right mouse, I'm going to use the pencil and I'm going to highlight the areas that I think are important. All right, so like you can see here on this tag, it has a couple of holes in it. Right now I'm saying I don't care about those holes. All I do is care about the outside edges of the tags. So what that means is that if the tag has a hole or if the tag doesn't have a hole, it doesn't matter because I'm not paying any attention. All right. And so we can do that, and we can save that. Now, once we do that, then that's the training mask. All right. Now, actually, I should mention up above the training mask, it says training stability. The training stability has three different settings, or three different stability ratings. One is called the location. Where is the object located at within the camera? And so you can see that it's quite happy where that object was when we took a snapshot. And then there's the orientation. Okay, so the orientation is good because you can tell on this tag which way it's oriented. There's no doubt, right, that this tag is oriented because it's got these over here on these, this side here, it has kind of angles on there. So it's very easy to tell the orientation. Now, if you had like something that was circular, that was like a perfect circle that you were trying to do, like a wheel or maybe like a coin, like a quarter or a dime, right? Those things are perfectly circular. They're a perfect circle, and so orientation would be very poor in that case. But that doesn't necessarily mean, you know, that, I mean, the vision will still work. It just can't tell how it's oriented. But, you know, with something that's perfectly round, it probably doesn't matter anyhow. So the orientation is not important. All right, so it's okay that the orientation is poor. And then the scale of the object, whether it can tell clearly how big the object is. Now they also have an emphasis area. And the emphasis area, number one, you notice over here the hole at the top left. All right, and what I did was I unmasked that. So you see that rectangular area there that's unmasked. And that little hole that's kind of blue around it right now is inside of that unmasked rectangle. And so what we need to do here, we're going to go to Edit Emphasis Area. So you need to, if you're going to use an emphasis area, what you have to do is make sure that it's unmasked first. So you have to go to the training mask and make sure that any area that you're going to say it must be emphasized, you can't say ignore it, right? It only makes sense. If you're saying emphasize it, this is really, really important, then you can't be ignoring it. All right, so so here is my emphasis screen, and it works pretty much the same way. So if I right click, I can make all the blue go away. All right, and so I can like say, I can emphasize everything. All right, or you know, you can say, well, wait a minute, we don't want to do that, so we want to unmask everything also. But this is the emphasis mask. And then we come in here and we left click, and what I'm saying is, hey, this hole is really important to me. All right, so if you care about that hole, you can emphasize it. All right, and so then you're making it blue. You're putting this blue haze around the points that you want to really, really emphasize. And what you do then is you use those as a scale. So then when you, you know, so when you're done here, what you can do is you can come along and do a snap and find, and it'll take a picture of what's in front of the camera right now and try to find a match. And it'll tell you the score of the matches. And there's two scores. The one is just the overall score, and then there's also an emphasis score. And so what we can do over here with these thresholds is we can adjust the threshold depending on how well it's matching something. So if it's not matching it real well, we can lower the threshold to say, well, let's be a little more forgiving of it. Or we can increase the threshold and say, oh, we're getting too many false matches and we want to ignore the false matches, so we can increase the threshold. So you have an overall threshold, and if and only if the emphasis emphasis area is enabled, can you use the EA score, right? Which is the emphasis area score threshold, which is this one right here. So see how that's grayed out now because I've disabled it. But if I come back here and then I enable it, then I can actually use this. The other option we can do with the emphasis area is we can actually, there's a check mark here, is that emphasis area allowed to move? So like if you were to look at some of the tags we have, you know, like, or even this tag, if you had this tag, but it was flipped over, so it was upside down, then this hole, instead of being in the top left, would be at the bottom left. But if you say allow the floating area, emphasis area, then it would be okay. It would still match it, even though it was in the bottom left instead of the top left. And so, and again, so what you can do is you can do a snap and find and compare. And a lot of times I'll have like 2 or 3 tags there to do that snap and find. And you can compare and look at your thresholds and see what's matching and what's not and make adjustments. And again, if you go back to the main thing, right, you can log these. So you can select either don't log or log just failures or just log everything. So when you're first starting out and trying to, you know, get it working, you probably want to like log all images for a little while. And then you can just come back later after you're more satisfied that it's doing pretty well at identifying good parts or bad parts. Because remember, this error proofing is basically inspecting and just looking to see whether the part is good or bad. Then you may just want to say, okay, well, let's just log the failed ones, or don't log anything. And so you can just, and you can actually do this while the system's running live. You could come in and make that change, and the next time that it actually called it, then after you saved it, it would change the logging option there. All right, but this is, again, this is called the error proofing, which is also just known as a inspection. We're just taking a picture of the part and we're looking at the part to make sure that the part looks the way we want it to do, or if it has the hole, like I say, we have to tell it, do we care about the hole or do we not care about the hole? And so once we do that, now we can go in and actually program. We can create the program to basically identify that. So let's see now if I have the program. It may have got deleted. All right, so but if we come over here to our teach pendant, and I'm going to go to select to look at the programs, and I want the JE. Okay, so I don't actually see a program here. So let me just create a new program. So I'm going to create a new program, and I'm just going to call this JE